meant to be my crowning achievement. Until recently, I had been employed solely in the production of portraits of society types, slop matrons who would languish before me like overripe fruit, demanding in no uncertain terms that I make them beautiful. It will hardly surprise you to learn that this culturally and financially vapid pursuit failed to sate my artistic ambition. I wanted to do something truly beautiful, something people would remember. I received the commission to design the fountain quite by chance. I had recently completed the portrait of one Thaddeus Clark, who, unbeknownst to me, was the brother of the mayor. Upon seeing my portrait, the mayor sent for me at once, summoning me to his chambers to discuss the commissioning of his own portrait. And whilst there, he also freely discussed his plans for the city, and, in particular, the fountain. I happened to mention, just in passing, that such a fountain should be a tribute to the work people like himself had done in building this fine city. It was, I am well aware, a cunning ploy to appeal directly to his vanity, but he did not see it as such, and after much further discussion, it was decided that the job of designing the statue at the center of the fountain would be mine. I became like a man possessed, working day and night in pursuit of perfection, my masterpiece. But come the third day, no plan, no design, no sketch, no model could come close to the vision that was inside my head. I am but frail or weak of mind. Why then did my hands seem so opposed to working with the rest of me? Turning to my window, I drew aside the curtains that had blocked both sun and moon while I worked. And as I gazed out at the gaslit beauty of the city, I realized that the inspiration I needed could be found in the one place where the fountain was to be constructed, the park. I did not see her at first. I had been consumed with pacing out the dimensions of my fountain when I became aware that I was not alone. There, in the shadows, was a woman, regarding me curiously. "What are you doing?" she asked, almost coyly. "I could ask you the same question," I said, "for if you're here to rob me, I'm afraid you will find me a most disappointing mark." "Oh no, nothing of the sort," she said. "I've merely come from visiting my father." She pointed off over her shoulders towards the council chambers, and despite the late hour, I could still see many a light flickering behind the heavy curtains. "I'm sorry, I meant you no offense." "What are you doing?" she repeated, stepping closer, the light of a nearby lamp catching her face. Oh, her face! Such beauty as was imbued in those curves could render even the most eloquent of poets speechless. "I am designing a fountain," I said, the words seeming to come from somewhere else. "Can I see?" she asked, stepping closer. Oh, I held my breath. Oh, the scent of her perfume permeated every part of my being. Yes, I had found my inspiration. I had found my muse. She came to visit me over the following days in my studio, accompanied all the while by her chaperone, a most disagreeable old crone by the name of Mrs. Fortescue. But yet again, I simply could not capture her beauty. She was there, right there before me. Why then could I not render in clay what my eyes so clearly beheld? Is this some cruel joke? Is God the only person by whose hand such beauty can be created? I was not alone in my frustrations. Mrs. Fortescue threatened to end my artistic endeavors should I not deliver soon. I had to do something. I had to capture her beauty. Alone in my studio, after yet another day of failure, I collapsed, my dreams disappearing before me like a phantom in the night. It was at this moment I was struck by an idea, one so shocking as to catch me completely by surprise. Did I really think this way? I turned the idea over and over in my head, and despite my initial revulsion, I saw that this was now my only option. I would soon have my fountain, and it would be even more beautiful than even I could ever imagine. The following day when they arrived, I set to work at once implementing my plan. I brought my muse into the studio under the guise of showing her some new designs, and I sent Mrs. Fortescue off downstairs to fetch me some charcoal from the fireplace. I closed the door behind her, sliding the latch into place ever so quietly so as not to arouse suspicion. But I needn't to have worried. She was so consumed in her study of my sketches that she failed to hear a thing. Taking a pen from the table, I walked up behind her, plunging it into the skin of her neck. She gasped, the blood foaming at her mouth. I wrenched downwards, completing the act. The blood flowed freely from my hands as if it were my own veins that had been punctured. There was a sound at the door. I opened it. Mrs. Fortescue was on the landing. She had the charcoal in her hand. At the sight of me, she let out a shriek, and I pushed her down the stairs. She fell heavily with a sound like snapping wood, and she came to rest at the bottom, dead. Her body had twisted over on itself, and her head had come to rest at such an angle as to cause me a moment's reflection as I considered its possibility. Oh, dismissing my curiosity, I set to work disposing of the corpse. I took her down to the basement where against one wall we have a great furnace, and placing her in the middle I ignited the flame, stepping back to watch her burn. Her skin popped and fizzed like some grotesque suckling pig. Oh yes, that would teach her to doubt my work. That would teach her to doubt me. You may ask me what I felt at a time like this, and I tell you truly I do not know. I felt no pity, no shame, no remorse. I felt like an author must feel towards his pen, or a carpenter his wood. No, that's not entirely true. As I encased the body of my muse within her plaster tomb, I began to feel euphoric. It was building up inside me slowly, like a flame getting its first taste of an accelerant, and then as I completed the mold, it erupted inside me like a burning pyre. Oh yes, I was no longer just a painter of portraits. I was an artist, and this was my masterpiece. I doted over that statue, watching it like a mother would watch her sleeping child. I was so consumed by my work that I failed to hear the sound of voices outside or a knocking upon my door. I went downstairs. It was the mayor. He and his associates were here to see the fountain. Oh, I bade them enter, bringing them up to my studio and telling them that they were about to be the very first people to lay eyes upon my statue, my masterpiece. Taking a hammer and chisel, I climbed upon a ladder and began to strike at the mold. Chunks of plaster cascading about me like snow. There was a crack, and the front fell away. They gasped. It was beautiful, they said. It was the most beautiful thing they had ever seen. Coming down, I beheld my statue for the first time, but what I saw was not beautiful. This was something else. This was an abomination. Oh yes, each line, each faithful curve had been reproduced in loving detail, but she was no longer beautiful. She had no life in her. That so wondrous a thing that had driven me to such depravity was missing. I struck at her, trying to somehow bring back an ounce of her beauty. Oh, they bade me to stop, but I did not hear them. It had to be perfect. Oh, God. I closed my eyes, praying that somehow when I opened them, she would be beautiful again. But she was not. And from the fury my rage had wrought upon her cheek, there now fell a single drop of blood. It fell down her cheek like a tear. What have I done?